I'm 75 now, and I started this when I was 15. I'll let you do the subtraction. I have been investigating these matters, and I have yet to find one bit of positive evidence that supports belief in any of them. Now, that does not show that it doesn't exist. But having spent most of my life looking into these things assiduously and dispassionately, I don't have any motive here. I don't have any end result that I'm looking to, except to find out whether or not. That's all. People always say, oh, no, you have a biased attitude. My bias, yes, I do have a biased attitude. That's in favor of rationality and logic and investigation. I'm willing to go along with whatever the answer is that presents itself. And so far, the answer that has presented itself very forcefully is there is no basis to belief in the paranormal, the occult, or the supernatural. Again, willing to be shown, and my dedication to that is shown in the fact that for many years I offered a $1,000 prize. Eventually it got to be $10,000 prize, and now it's $1 million prize. Now that's not my personal money. It was given to us by a wealthy donor who decided that I should have some teeth in the challenge that I offer through the James Randi Educational Foundation. So I'm willing to be shown. I'm $1 million worth of willing to be shown.
In your opinion, do scams do they get recycled, or are they inventing new ones?
It's interesting you ask that, because I recently did a TV series in Korea, South Korea, I needn't add, I guess. And that went for many weeks. I was over there taping all the sequences in it, and they told me when I arrived, they had interviewed me right here in this same room previously. And when I finally got over there, they said, well, Mr. Randi, we've got a raft of things here to show you. And I'm sure these are things you've never seen before. This is absolutely unique to South Korea. And I thought, okay, that'll be interesting, because it's the same old, same old. It was the same old, same old. It was exactly what has been going on since literally the 1600s. I was able to trace some of them back to as early as 1640. Schemes, gimmicks, self-delusions and whatnot, and notions of supernatural powers that existed as far back as that, and before, I'm sure. We had the usual dowsers, we had the usual healers, we had the usual medical diagnosticians who could look at you and tell you what your diseases were, the astrologers, all making the same claims that have been made all over the world. And the reason for that is that they find out that others are very successful in other cultures doing this sort of thing, and they say, hey, I guess that's for me. Now that addresses another question here, of course. Are these people conscious frauds? Mostly no. Most of them are people who really believe they have the powers, like the astrologers and the dowsers, particularly the dowsers, people with the fork sticks or the pendulums or the bent coat hanger wires, who think they can find water, lost children, money, cigarettes, whatever. You name anything, and they say they can find it by means of the fork stick technique. They're well-meaning people who are self-deluded, because when they actually get to be tested, they get exactly what we would expect by chance alone. They never do any better than that, significantly. That is, when expectation is 1 out of 10, some of them will get 2 out of 10. Some of them will get 0. And they're the most puzzled people. They look at me and, wow, it's always worked before. And I'll say the reason that it appeared to work before is because you didn't test it properly. You have to do it in what we call a double-blind experiment. And they've never heard of that sort of thing. But as soon as we do it, and again, right in this very room, we've tested any number of dowsers. On that shelf over there, we have some encyclopedias, you see. And one of the gentlemen who did the dowsing test right here, we cleared out the tables and chairs, and I had him scan the whole surface of the ground here with his fork stick. And I said, are there any anomalies here that would throw you off? That's the first thing you have to do, because they like to claim afterwards, oh, there's a buried Volkswagen down there, or a meteorite or something 2 miles down, and that threw my dowsing rod off. Well, he found 2 or 3 spots, hot spots here in the room that we had to avoid, so we marked them with little red markers. But otherwise, we had 10 styrofoam cups with caps on them, and he had brought along some samples of gold that he said he was very sensitive to. There's a gold nugget and several gold coins, or so he thought. They were actually the gold-colored dollar coins that we have now, and they're made from manganese bronze, but he didn't know about that. He thought they were gold. But he did have a gold nugget there that I recognized as genuine gold. And what we did was, first of all, we did 20 tests with him. That's what we call the baseline, but we left the cups open. He knew in which cup the gold was located. We could see it, and the camera showed it very clearly. He had to show that by moving over all of the 10 cups with his dowsing rod, he got no reaction except went over the cup that had the gold in it. And indeed, the stick dipped down dramatically as soon as he was over that cup. So he did it 20 times, and he was successful 20 times, as we would expect. So it's a double-blind experiment. I entered the room with him. We were the only people in the room. I didn't know which cup it was in, and he certainly didn't know. And he proved that, because he got 1 out of 10 correct. He was supposed to go on to the next 10. That was in our agreement, but they almost always abort at that point. They decide not to do it any further. Now he is saying that we tricked him somehow, that we had substituted this or that or the other thing, although he had to go around, open all 10 cups, and find out in which cup it actually was, and examine it to make sure that it was a sample that he had originally offered. Well, then he said that those encyclopedias threw him off, because he said they have gold stamping on them. That's manganese bronze, too. It's a printing ink made to resemble gold, but they don't use gold. It's rather expensive. And I told him that, and he said, oh, well, then there's gold in behind the wall or on the other side of the wall that you don't know about. But you see, you can't offer that excuse, simply because we did the baseline test. His dowsing powers were working 20 out of 20. That's 100%. And let me see. Yeah, that's 100%. My mathematics isn't all that great, you see, so I have to check. And he had shown that it worked when he knew where it was. When he didn't know where it was, he got exactly what would be expected by chance. Now he won't come back for another test. And that's invariable with these people. They will never come back for a second test. Now I'm talking about dowsers. Because what we've done is we've challenged their belief system. We've cast doubt on it. And this is something I used to say they want to be true. I now say they need to be true. They desperately need this to be true because this is something they depend upon. This makes them different from most folks. It makes them important. It gives them status in the group that they mix with, which is usually other dowsers, who are always discovering some new wrinkle that if you oil the end of the wire or something like that, it'll work much better when you're detecting certain materials or whatever. They always come up with some little touch like that that impresses their fellow dowsers. So what I'm doing is I'm threatening their security by casting doubt on these things. But I think they're better off for recognizing what the truth is if they would ever accept it. The dowsers won't, ever. I've never had a dowser come to me afterward and say, I've decided you're right, Mr. Randi, this was imagination on my part. Never. We've had them say it for the moment, but half an hour later you get a call on the phone saying, I think it was because of those lights. Those are extra lights that you put up, and they have a magnetic influence, and they threw me off.
Do you think, in one of my theories, is that human emotion, as you hit on there, is behind a lot of our beliefs?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Our need for this sort of thing, need for some magic, need for something different, or a need to match somebody else's performance, like Dad was a dowser, so I'm a dowser too. Now, Dad couldn't do it, and you can't do it, but you don't want to know that. You remember that Dad reported to you endless streams of successes. He never told you about the failures. Well, you're not talking about the failures either, because that's what Dad did. They tend to only accept what works, and they reject what doesn't work. But the idiomotor reaction, the dowsing thing, which is the fact that you are actually sloping the stick because you have an expectation this is the right answer, or you're shaking the pendulum the right way or altering its direction, but you're unconscious of it. And we've designed several tests that I've done with media people who can't believe that it would be that strong, but the idiomotor reaction is very strong. We refer to it on our webpage, and I usually send people there.
How many challenges have you engaged in?
That seems to be a simple question with a simple answer. All you would have to say is a number, but it's not that easy. It's a very complex answer that I have to give you. We have on our webpage the challenge form. All you have to do is fill it out, follow the instructions, and away we go. That sounds like a simple procedure. They can also send us a stamped self-addressed envelope out of the country. They just send us the envelope with their address on it. We put the postage on it. I get endless letters with Hungarian stamps on it and that sort of thing, as if we can use Hungarian stamps in the United States. I don't think the post office is very fond of that idea. However, it seems like a simple procedure. For them, it's not. They have to say what they can do, under what circumstances, with what accuracy, and say it in about 2 paragraphs. We've received up to 60 pages of closely scribbled handwriting talking about St. Peter and the vibrations and the clouds of the mystical figures in them and whatnot. I don't want to know all of that. Just what can you do, under what circumstances, with what accuracy? 2 paragraphs, no more. So that kind of thing is sent back to them. So we get hundreds in a year, hundreds of applications. But the applications don't amount to anything that's going to be completed. In other words, they'll put in the application, but it turns out it's not notarized, or they didn't state what they can do, or they didn't follow one of the other rules, one of the other easily acceptable and easily accomplished provisions that are required, the things that are right on there that they must do. Very simple and straightforward to me. But to some of these folks, no, it's not that simple. It's very difficult. So a good 90% of the people who first apply never come back again. If we send them an objection or we mail them the form back saying you didn't sign it, or you didn't get it notarized, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, that's usually the end of it for a good 90% of them. Of the 10% that's left, they find it very difficult to state what they can do, under what circumstances, with what accuracy. 3 simple things that they should be able to say, but they can't. And I'm negotiating with a couple of them now. We're sending email back and forth and back and forth. And the latest answer I got just this morning was, well, I just feel that's the right way to do it. I don't care about that. I don't care about your personal feelings on the thing. What can you do or not do? But they can't seem to answer these questions. So another half, that's another 5% of the total now, they drop out at that point because they can't say what they can do. The other 5, most of them are dowsers. The vast majority of them, a good 65% or so, are dowsers, because the ideomotor reaction is very, very strong, and self-delusion is a very strong motive for bringing about this misunderstanding of how the real world works, is the way I put it. Of the remainder of the people who actually get to that point, or that stage in the challenge, in the application, I should say, we get healers, people who can diagnose or heal at a distance. And then they'll start in, it has to be this, it has to be that. The person has to not drink coffee for 2 months, and it goes on and on and on with all the provisions that are necessary. And then there are a few of them are astrologers as well, but they want me to assemble 600 people whose birth dates are, I say, no, you assemble the 600 people. Oh, I don't have the means to do that, you do. No, I'm sorry, you have to arrange it, because we won't pay any of the expenses involved in these things, and I'm not going to tie my staff up going through phone books trying to find 600 people who were born under the sign of Sagittarius, for example. So it all peters out. It comes down to the point that about 1 to 1.5% of the people who do make application by actually sending in the application actually get tested. They're not usually tested here. Maybe 3 or 4 times a year we'll test somebody right here at the James Randi Educational Foundation in Fort Lauderdale. The rest of them are tested. We're negotiating with one fellow to be tested in Australia, for example. The Australian skeptics there are very active in this field, and they accept, as the skeptic groups all over the world do, they accept to do the preliminary challenge of these people where they are. Now, this reporter from Brisbane in Queensland in Australia, he just emailed me this morning saying, how many people will you be bringing with you, and what airline will you be coming on? I'm supposed to be investigating an oily statue of the Virgin Mary in the local church. I've seen a lot of oily statues. This is oil of roses is the current thing. For the last 6 months, it's always oil of roses. Before that, it's usually Kmart shaving lotion or some such thing that appears on the statue. But I'm not about to take a crew of people and travel halfway across the world, which is to the other side of the world as far as you can get without going into orbit, just to see another oily statue, usually made in Korea and sold in Australia.